Welcome to Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange. I'm with Charlie Palullo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Palullo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. We invite you to please click like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click that bell for notifications so you know as soon as new content drops. All those things really help us grow the channel. And if you just prefer listening to your podcast, we're on all your favorite podcast apps. And if you're a Texans fan, the three of us are doing live reactions following every game this season for our Texans on Tap podcast. If you missed our breakdown of Texans Colts, you can find that over on our other YouTube channel, Sports Map Texans, or in audio form, again, at all your favorite podcast apps. Just search Texans on Tap. Gents, as the season has entered its final stretch run here, we discussed the importance of the Astros' ability to win these games during this more difficult stretch. Houston goes to Baltimore, gets a split. They lose 2 of 3 to Philly, but curb stomp them on the way out the door. Then sweep the Royals, get swept by the Reds, scoring just 8 runs over 3 games. Then hang 19 runs on the D-backs in their first 2 games of the series, only to get ran off the field by Arizona in the finale. Charlie, you've said just a couple weeks ago that the spectrum of success for the Astros was on one end, not making the playoffs, and on the other end, all the way to winning the World Series. The Mariners have gone 5-5 over their last 10, so the Astros have been able to maintain that 4.5 game lead as we record this. The remaining series for Houston, they've got the A's at home. They go on the road to face the Angels and Padres, back home for the Angels and Mariners, and then end their season at Cleveland for the Guardians. That's a very manageable schedule. However, Houston has shown us over this past stretch that they can beat anyone, but also be beaten by anyone. So, Charlie, at this point, how do you handicap this team on that success spectrum right now?
Well, the only way they miss the playoffs, and I know the C word is the one that everyone uses. I will say rather than choke, they'd have to blow it. Or C word, collapse, which doesn't automatically mean you choked. It can just mean you played real sucky baseball at an inopportune time. 4.5 up starting the week. I mean, most of the sand is through the hourglass. There's still some in there, but if the Astros go 9-10 in their remaining games, well, the Mariners have to go 14-6. Is Seattle capable of 14-6? Nothing would indicate that, given the way the Mariners have played for a couple of months now. But in a short stretch, as Joaquin Andujar put it, one word, you never know. In terms of the Astros' baseball bipolarity over the last 3 weeks, as Craig Biggio said it thousands of times, that's baseball. Right? The Astros are 9-10 over their last 19 games. There's nothing calamitous about that. And any series that goes by where the Astros don't lose ground to the Mariners, that's a win for them. I think plausibly the only way the Astros fail to win the division is if the Mariners come in here and sweep the Astros, the 3 games the last week of the series. Remember, the Mariners do own the tiebreak if they win just 1 of the 3 games. But if the Mariners win 2 out of 3 here, well, they're still 3.5 behind the Astros, 4 in the loss column, with 3 more games shaved off the schedule. So unless the Astros really, really free fall, and the Mariners would have to play some hellacious ball, right? Seattle does start a 9-game homestand, but they get the Padres and the Yankees as 2 of the opponents, real good teams going into Seattle. So while, yes, it's still conceivable the Astros could go down in flames, and if they blow the division to Seattle, they probably would be blowing a wild card at the same time, though Minnesota is really fading badly for that 3rd wild card spot while clinging to it. So, there's the downside. And remember last September, the Astros went 2-7 against the A's and the Royals, the 2 worst teams in baseball. So in a short stretch of games, anything truly can happen, good or bad. But other than the sky fell, the Astros are going to make the playoffs. So the upside race is, can they run down Cleveland? Probably not. But just as the Mariners have that sliver of hope attached to coming into Houston and winning 3, the Astros play the last 3 games of the season at Cleveland. If the Astros can go in there and sweep that series and tie the Guardians, well, the Astros would hold that tiebreaker. In the macro, are the Astros going to win the World Series this year? Highly likely not. But get into October, at the start of the playoffs last year, a Rangers-Diamondbacks World Series matchup was highly unlikely. It's the spin of the roulette wheel. You're shooting craps. in the baseball playoffs. Get in the tournament and see what happens. And the Astros at this point are probably 95% plus to get in the tournament.
And we know playoff baseball. What is that about? It's about pitching. We've seen great bullpens, great starters lead these Astros teams to championships. And, we look at the last 30 days of the season, Astros third best ERA in baseball, even in front of the Mariners, ninth best. That's their big strength, is that pitching. And Astros are doing it better lately. I know we've had some blips here from, Arrighetti and Verlander, but overall, these guys are really good. You got to trust Fromber going into the postseason. Hunter Brown looks like, maybe your future number one. So I like what I'm seeing there. Bullpen's still solid. So for me, it's about pitching. And I think they're going to get healthy. Bregman, we just got to kind of manage him through. But I think Tucker's going to get more healthy. Altuve's starting to turn it on. We're seeing Pena showing some power to the opposite field. So I feel pretty optimistic. But Charlie's right. We've seen him lose to bad teams and come out and, kick some butt against the good teams. But that is kind of the nature of baseball. That's how the Astros roll. But I think it's a good sign that they show a bunch of power against the Diamondbacks after losing a 1-0 game against the Reds in that finale there. So they bounce back. They're playing better at home, which gives me, at least I feel good. Like Minute Maid isn't some place where you're like, oh no, they have to play at home. They've been playing well at home this year. They're 41-30 at home, 36-36 away. So, you'll take that. So for me right now, I'm pretty optimistic despite, the finale against the D-backs.
In this spectacular run of 7 consecutive American League Championship Series appearances, other than the COVID season with the funky dynamics of the postseason structure, the Astros have never had to deal with the best of 3, right? Added within the last 4 years. If you're not one of the top 2 seeds in the Astros year in, year out, either the best record in the American League or the second best record in the American League, they're not catching the Yankees. They're 5 games behind the Yankees and the tiebreaker. Now, yeah, could the Yankees completely fall apart coupled with the Astros going crazy? Sure. But that's less likely than the combo of the Astros falling apart and Seattle catching them because the Mariners would have the tiebreaker. And you know what? If the Yankees fall apart, in part, that would mean the Orioles probably put it on the Pinstripers in their remaining series. And then the Astros, while holding the tiebreaker over the Orioles, it's just tough to make up 5 games ground within 3 weeks of schedule. So if they can get to Cleveland with a chance, because one, playing a 2 out of 3 series, if you're playing, well, maybe not the White Sox, but anybody other than the White Sox, you can lose a 2 out of 3 game series, right? It's like that. One game where the other team hits or pitches really well, and one game where your pitcher just flops, it's over. It can be over like that. Ask the Dodgers, right? You win 100 games every year. It can be over really quickly in a best out of 3, best out of 5, and ultimately in the World Series. The truly better team doesn't always win because it's a shorter series. Proof of real quality comes over 162. The NCAA tournament, it's the hottest team over 3 weeks. The baseball playoffs, it's the hottest team over that span of a month. But if the Astros don't have a top 2 seed, they have to navigate the best of 3, and that being Tuesday, Wednesday, and if necessary, Thursday. If it goes 3 games, your 4th best starter has to start the best of 5 division series, right? You're going from Tuesday to Saturday. That's only 3 days rest. So your game 1 starter in the wild card series unavailable until game 2 on Sunday of the ALDS. So that's a little bit of cart ahead of the horse. And while wild card teams fairly regularly are going to make a run to the World Series, it's obviously the more difficult track to take, and you want to avoid that track if you could do so. But item 1 for the Astros is get in the playoffs, and if you have to sort through the best of 3 to move on, do it.
Yeah. And as you're talking about playoff positioning, it's like when you look at the remaining schedule, I trust them to win a series against Seattle and then against the Guardians. Like, I think that's very, they're very capable of doing that. What concerns me is what are they going to do against the A's in these 2 series that they have remaining against them? Because we know the bipolarity, as you said, Charlie, of this team. And they are very capable of dropping both series, quite frankly, against the Angels, because it's the unexpected nature of how, an inconsistent nature of how Houston plays. Like Josh, you mentioned how the pitching has really carried this team as of late. One of the biggest pain points for this team has been scoring runs consistently. Good team average, batting average, good team OPS, and that's been without Kyle Tucker and with missing Bregman for chunks of games. Charlie, you wrote about some of the lineup options for Houston now that Tucker's back in a limited capacity and Bregman's limited availability now. For those who haven't had a chance to read that on sportsmap.com, can you walk us through? Yeah, I know they need to remedy that immediately, but for those who are behind the curve a little bit, can you walk us through some of those options that you lined out? And then, Josh, I'm curious your reactions to that.
Yeah, look, the Astros lineup is top heavy, as pretty much every lineup is. That's why your better guys hit near the top and your lesser guys bat near the bottom. The cut line, if it were a golf tournament, the cut line with the Astros is 5. If we're counting post mid-May Bregman as a real positive offensive player, which we should. So Altuve 1, Alvarez 2. Altuve has not been one of the Astros' 2 best offensive players this year, but he's having another good season. A marked drop off from the last 2 years, but still another good season. And there's zero question. Of course, he's going to be their leadoff hitter in every game. So keeping Alvarez in the 2 spot, Espada, I have no problem with that. It does impinge upon Yordan's RBI opportunities a little bit in the first inning. Only one guy has the potential to get on ahead of him. Nevertheless, he's your most devastating offensive force. So having him up second, giving him the opportunity for that extra plate appearance relative to anyone behind him in the batting order, very sensible. So now we get to decision time. Kyle Tucker, for his career, has hit lefties quite well. Not as well as he's hit righties. And this season, there's the first couple of games back. They don't mean anything. But he was 218 against lefties the first 2 months of the season, right? When he was an MVP candidate, he was destroying right-handed pitching. Against left-handed pitching, not so much. So if you're facing a left-handed starter, I want Yainer Diaz in a 3 spot ahead of Tucker. In fact, you could go Diaz, Bregman, Tucker against a left-handed starter. Against a right-handed starter, they all hit. I'm not worried about going lefty-righty to play the bullpen matchup end of the game. If Tucker gets his legs underneath him, he's a better offensive player than Alex Bregman. Has been 3 years in a row. I want Tucker up ahead of Alex Bregman. Then you have the question with Yainer Diaz, who's certainly overall a better offensive player this season than Alex Bregman. The argument over the years with Bregman to have him up higher is the on-base guy, right? He draws all the walks. Bregman this year stopped walking. I mean, he still walks more than Yainer, still walks more than the perennially now disappointing Jeremy Pena as an offensive player. But Bregman's walk percentage is down by more than 40%. Alex Bregman's never had an on-base percentage below 350 in his career. He's 315 this season, starting the A series. Bregman, to me, is the 5-hitter. So it's Altuve 1, Yordan 2, and then lefty-righty starter, Tucker, Diaz, Tucker, Bregman 5. None of those are life or death, Menza or moron decisions for Joe Espada, but they're the top 5, and then you get down to the lesser cast of hitters 6 through 9.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I like this lineup. It makes me remember other points in this season when Jeremy Pena was hitting 4th or Singleton was hitting 5th. I remember some games where Jake Myers, I think, was hitting 4th. And I mean, that just tells you it's a long season. All the stuff that we've been through this year, if ever there's a time to kind of get everybody back and kind of get a feel for who these players are in 2024 with, just a few weeks left in the season, I think this is a good time to do it. And I like the flexibility of moving guys around. It makes sense for certain matchups. And if Tucker, that's a better spot for him against lefties, drop him down a little bit, I'm all for it. So I just, that length that they have to have 5 guys that you can really trust at the top of this lineup, I think is huge. And then when you do get the random Pena home run or Jake Myers gets a little bit hot for a while, we've even seen Chas McCormick hit a little bit better. We'll see if he even sticks with the big league team, but it's better to see improvement than him getting actually worse, if that's even possible. So I like the way things are shaping up here. And Caratini's been a big wild card to, use him this year. And he's been a real positive addition for this club. So, as it stands right now, I like this offense, but what we have to keep in mind, it's kind of been this way all season to where, the OPS is good, but the runs don't line up to that. So you look right now at the Astros OPS, where are they? They're 8th in OPS, but they're like 12th as far as runs scored. So that's still a bugaboo all season long, where they just haven't been able to capitalize on the guys on base and score those runs as often as you would like.
Yeah, the bottom of the lineup for too much of the season has just been a sinkhole. All right, the decisions, I think, for Espada down the stretch, and then when you get into the postseason, in whatever order, the top 5 is the top 5, and just hold your breath that Bregman's elbow doesn't bark, because the drop-off is substantial offensively and defensively. You go from Alex Bregman to either Shea Whitcomb or Mauricio Dubon. Oh, and tip to Dubon. and the kids. Never dive into first base unless you're specifically trying to avoid a tag because you see the throw coming. There's a reason Olympic sprinters don't dive across the finish line. Diving is not faster. It slows you down. It's physiology. And by the way, you can jam a thumb into the bag and have to miss games, Mauricio Dubon. So it's hustle, but it's dopey hustle. Don't do that anymore. Anyway, so you have, I think, Singleton's going to play first base against right-handers. Against lefties, Caratini, Diaz. One catches, the other is at first base. I think to what you raised, Josh, McCormick has shown a pulse and that he's a right-handed hitter. He's making the playoff roster. With Tucker here, even if it's only DHing, well, if he's DHing, Jordan is in left field. We know Myers, because of defense, is going to be in center field. There is no reason to have both Ben Gamel and Jason Hayward on the playoff roster at the expense of McCormick. Gamel pretty clearly is ahead of Hayward right now. Hayward's the odd man out, though to me, it's ridiculous to carry 13 pitchers. So you can actually carry Gamel and Hayward and Chaz, because you don't need 13 pitchers. You don't need 12 pitchers. Unless all hell is broken loose, you don't need 11 pitchers in a 3-game series. But I think, it's either Singleton or Caratini. And we know Myers is going to be in there and hopefully batting ninth, just playing center field for the defense. And that's, I think, the lineup composition 6 through 9.
While we're talking about Bregman, his pending free agency continues to loom, and we'd probably be remiss if we didn't mention this, that we just saw Matt Chapman ink that 6-year, $150 million deal with San Francisco. Does that set the market for Bregman? And if it does that basically price out Houston on re-signing Alex?
In the end, what are you worth? You're worth what someone is willing to pay.
Yep.
Matt Chapman's not worth 6 years, $151 million when he's starting that contract at 32 years of age. But team dynamics matter. Where a franchise is matters. The last 3-4 years, the Giants have been swinging high and missing. Luckily for them, on acquiring Giancarlo Stanton. They went after Ohtani. They went after Aaron Judge the year before that. And they haven't landed any of them. So the closest thing to a tentpole player they have right now is Matt Chapman, who's revived himself offensively this season, but he's nowhere close to an elite offensive player. Defensively, he grades out as, by a good margin, the best defensive third baseman in the game. But the Giants have a lot of payroll flexibility. Blake Snell's probably coming off that roster as a one and done, and they got a lot of young players and a lot of not so good players. But to go 6 years at $25 million per for Matt Chapman, no way the Astros are going there on Alex Bregman, and they shouldn't. This is the 5th consecutive year where Alex Bregman's going to good player, not a star. He's 31 years old, starting spring training next season. He's having the worst full-length season of his career this year. I mentioned the on-base percentage falling off precipitously this year. The power numbers are fine. He's going to have 30 doubles, about 25 home runs, but the OPS is well down on the back of on-base percentage. Maybe it's just an aberration, but Alex Bregman does not provide the superstar offensive output. He's a very good third baseman. He's not Matt Chapman. But if you're the Astros, do you view this in the tunnel as you did with George Springer? We're just not going to 6 years, $150 million. We don't care who signs it. Carlos Correa, remember, they offered him 5 years, $160 million, $32 million per year for a then 26-year-old shortstop, right? Bregman's going to be a 31-year-old third baseman. But with Chapman off the board, Bregman clearly is going to be the best third baseman on the market. Timing isn't everything in life, but it damn sure helps a lot. And when you look at teams that can use a third baseman badly, the Seattle Mariners and their way too often laughably pee-poor offense, Bregman would be a sensational fit for the Mariners. If you're Seattle and willing to spend money, we're hurting the Astros and we're helping ourselves. A twofer. Bregman, didn't he build a home in Arizona in the offseason? The Diamondbacks, leading Major League Baseball in runs scored this year. Well, Suarez might be a temp for them at third base and could be a fallback short-term option for the Astros in a de facto trade. If Arizona jumps in and Breggy from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Arizona right next door, and the oh my God scenario, a really good American League team with a gaping hole at third base, the New York Yankees. Bregman doesn't strike me as a guy who'd be shy of going on the big stage, and bygones are bygones. You're going to pay me enough money over enough years. As soon as I start hitting, Yankee fans will stop the, F you, Bregman, or anything like that. They take to him very well. So Bregman's going to have a wonderfully robust marketplace for generations of Bregmans. And at this point, I guess very little in sports should shock us contractually, but I'll be stunned if the Astros pay top of market, which is what's going to take to retain Alex Bregman.
Yeah, I mean, Chapman's another Scott Boras guy like Bregman is. So Scott Boras is going to be looking at this number and going, this has to be somewhat in the ballpark of what we're looking for with Bregman. The good news is that number is $151 million, not like with Correa or early on what we thought Bregman would be wanting $300 million or something wild like that. At least this is a little more sensible in the ballpark. But I don't think they're going to pay him more than Altuve. I don't see Jim Crane wanting to do that. But Scott Boras is going to say, hey, this is kind of the precedent for this deal. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bregman gets something around 6 years, $150 million. I don't necessarily think he'll get it from the Astros, but you throw him with Bregman, all the World Series he's been to and the leadership. And, it's not just about his numbers for 2024. He brings a lot of other intangibles to a ball club, the defense. So I think Bregman's going to be coveted, especially as we see if the Astros make another deep playoff run here and you're seeing him on your television winning games. There's going to be a robust market for Bregman. I just don't know if the Astros are going to commit to that. I think what Bryce Matthews projects as in the next year or two, I think will factor in to how they make this decision. But we'll see. I mean, he's only in AA right now. That's a long way from doing what Alex Bregman does. That's for sure.
And we have no idea what Bregman is thinking about this, because if he was to say, I've not thought about it at all, I think a little bit of Pinocchio there, but that he hasn't done his personal deep dive yet. Will he take it as a diss if the Astros treat him the way they did Springer, who they really never made a bona fide offer to? Correa, they made a perfectly fine offer. It just wasn't close to what Correa thought he was going to get in the marketplace at the time. Bregman, who always has a chip on his shoulder, right? Part of why he wears number 2 is because he thought he should have been the number 1 pick in the draft, along with being a big Derek Jeter guy growing up. So would Bregman say, all right, Astros, you had your chance to make me an Astro for life and keep me as a, semi-franchise player, but you chose not to do so. Watch me now become one of your worst nightmares the next few years as Seattle, with all that pitching and young talent percolating in the system. It wouldn't be a one-year move for Bregman. It'd be over the next 4, 5, 6 years. But Seattle's also one of the best pitchers parks in baseball. Bregman's a very sharp guy, and he studies the game. Would he rue going to Seattle, where all his pop flies or first-row line drives that land in the Crawford boxes in left center field get caught shy of the warning track in Seattle? Oops, Arizona, reigning National League champion, really good team, good core of young talent going forward, and basically in his backyard. The Astros, you'd much rather lose him to the Diamondbacks, or hell, even the Dodgers. Get him over to the National League rather than going to Seattle or the Yankees.
We did see Jordan Montgomery come out and say that Boras fumbled the bag for him over the offseason. And, looking at the Astros were able to, agree on an extension with Altuve. On the other hand, they famously ghosted Boras when it came to Correa's negotiations. So those were handled very differently. The difference being Altuve was very clear and vocal about wanting to be an Astro for life. Is there an outside chance that maybe Bregman takes maybe a backloaded deal with Houston or something that, maybe he just wants to be in Houston because this is where he's made his hay and he has fond memories and wants to continue to compete, where maybe that's not as, a big of a likelihood, depending on if he just goes and grabs a bag from a worse team. I mean, obviously, the teams we mentioned about are in playoff contention, whether it's Arizona or New York. But what if you had to handicap it? Where would you grade that? Them being able to find some sort of middle ground where it's respectable to Bregman's talents, but also is team friendly enough to where they can continue to keep this window open for a little longer.
I don't think he's weighing loyalty discount at all, nor is he under any duty or obligation to do so, right? It's a business, as everyone is fond of saying. He will have attractive alternatives Altuve was a very special case. 5 years, $125 million for Altuve, which just moving forward may be a deal the Astros regret, right? Altuve has declined this season. He's starting that 5-year extension a couple of months shy of turning 35 years old next May. Bregman will be 31 just about opening day 2025. So he'll be looking for longer than 5 years. And I think the floor probably is. If Chapman got 6, over time, Bregman's been a better player than Chapman. Not this year, but over time, he's been a better player. So I want the 6 years. And quick aside to the aside, Jordan Montgomery, stop whining. Remember, the agent works for you. So if Boris dropped the bag, that was at your behest. Whether the Rangers or someone else lowballed you at only 4 years, $100 million, and Boris was saying, no, I'll get you 7 years, $200 million. I mean, Boris has an obligation to bring whatever offers were made to the client. If Montgomery turned all those down because Boris was promising the moon, the stars, and anything else out there in the galaxy that Montgomery wanted, Scott Boras didn't have a good offseason, but on the individual case level, the player turned down an offer and has to settle for 1 year's $25 million. Think of it this way, Jordan Montgomery. You've been garbage this year with the Diamondbacks. Now you're guaranteed another $25 million next year just by picking up that option.
Yeah, and you talked about maybe backloading it, Brandon, maybe something like that for Bregman. Maybe on the Astros books, that could make some sense, because if we look at Altuve's deal, it's front-loaded. The last 2 years of Altuve, in 2028, he makes $12.5 million. In 2029, he makes $10 million. So from what I understand, they wanted to do that because Altuve didn't want to look like the 39-year-old player that maybe he's not playing up to what he used to, that's making $32 million a year. So would that make sense on the books to where you front load Altuve's, you back load Bregman's? I don't know. I don't know how they calculate those things, but it would give you more flexibility overall. But I think the other elephant in the room is, what are they going to do with Tucker? Because I don't think any of us think they're going to sign both Tucker and Bregman. Do you guys? I don't see that happening.
No, and Tucker's multiple years younger. Presuming there is no structural issue that, hey, crazy stuff happens. It turned out to be 3 months because it was a broken leg, not just a bone bruise. But Tucker should be fine going forward. He's a better bet to be a better player than Alex Bregman. He has been 3 years running, and he's 3 years younger. But does that mean the Astros will be willing to go to 8 years, $240 million, or whatever Tucker's market is? But, on Alex Bregman, he put his Houston home up for sale last offseason. Now, maybe that was a tremendously clever passive-aggressive move. I don't think he wound up selling it, but that he is just wedded to Houston because I have to be an Astro for life. There's no indication that that's the case.
Well, if they don't sign Bregman, they're going to have to fill that vacancy somehow at third. And if they're going to, look for a big league hitter in free agency, they're going to be paying some dollars to somebody, unless, they're counting on bringing up one of the young guys to fill that. But I just don't know. They're going to have to pay somebody. And so I just wonder if there's something.
I mentioned Suarez with the Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
If he takes 1 year, $20 million, he's playing for $15 million this year in Arizona, or 2 years with a vesting option or an opt-out. You're talking over $100 million fewer dollars than if you're going to match what's out there for Breggy.
Yeah. Well, hopefully some of the big leaguers are watching today's episode, because Charlie's been dropping nuggets for both like Dubon and Jordan Montgomery. So a lot of good stuff here. We'll leave it here.
We're helpers.
That's right. We are solution oriented. That's it for part 1 of Stone Cold Stros. We have another video dropping on Tuesday where we're going to dig into some of the Verlander stuff and the starting rotation and postseason projections. So keep an eye out for that. And until then, go Stros.